Hello and welcome to all of our new listeners. I'm Mimi Fotz and this is Hello from the Van. I recently went on a field trip with my kids to the local children's museum. There they have this butterfly exhibit that you walk through. As someone who lived through the great monarch migration of the 90s, I had a lot of questions. I also realized that butterflies and moths are a blind spot in my knowledge. I don't know a lot about them. And before I knew it, this very curious group of children had a lot of questions. And this was one of those times as an adult that you are truly humbled by how little you know on a subject, exacerbated by the fact that my cell phone was at about 2% battery and I just couldn't Google things. So yeah, there was a lot I didn't know. And I just thought to myself, how am I well into my midlife years and unaware of the many differences between moths and butterflies? And that leads us to where we are today. We're talking about moths and butterflies and cocoons and chrysalises because this is a subject I don't know a lot about. So I'm going to learn and I'm taking you along with me. I genuinely thought that moths and butterflies were just the same bug. I thought it was a lot like pumas, mountain lions, panthers, and cougars. They're all the same thing. I thought it was like that. Nope, I stand corrected. Yeah, it's not. Butterflies and moths are similar in a lot of ways. This is because they're a part of the same order of winged insects called Lepidoptera. I know, it sounds like a dinosaur. Same. They're kind of like the day and night version of this order. Most of their differences can be chalked up to, are they functioning in darkness or are they functioning in light? For example, most butterflies fly during the day, they're bright, and they don't really need smell because they focus on sight. Most moths fly at night, which means they have to be disguised during the day, so they're not as colorful, they're not as bright, and they have larger antennae because they need to be able to smell to find their mate because they're functioning at night in the darkness. One very interesting fact that I discovered in my research is that moths have a thicker coating of scales than butterflies. This is what gives them their heavier, furry appearance. Why? Because moths are flying at night and don't have the sun to warm their bodies like butterflies do. So instead, moths generate heat internally by vibrating their muscles, and their heavy scales then insulate them against heat loss. It's like a butterfly wearing a parka. Both butterflies and moths go through what's called a metamorphosis. This is when they change from a caterpillar to a moth or a butterfly as an adult. A metamorphosis is like puberty, but for insects and bugs. Human puberty tends to go baby, child, teenager, adult. To talk about it loosely, that's our metamorphosis. The metamorphosis for a butterfly and moth is similar. Like humans, they have 4 distinct life stages: egg, larva, sometimes called a caterpillar, pupa, and then adult. However, butterflies create chrysalises in their pupa or teenage stage, while moths create a cocoon. To put this into perspective, they spend their teenage days in their rooms and they don't come out until they are matured adults, something I'm sure some of us humans can relate to. So what is the difference between the two? A chrysalis is for a butterfly. It's smooth, normally a bright color to blend into trees and leaves during the day. It has a hard outer casing, and it normally hangs from a surface like a twig or a leaf or a structure to make it look like a leaf or something naturally part of the foliage. Cocoons are for moths. They're usually made of silk. They're softer, and they can be just about anywhere. They don't have to hang. They can be stuck to the underside of something or stuck to the back of a road sign or to a tree. They kind of blend in. To help me remember this, I think of a cocoon as a fruit snack and a chrysalis as a Skittle. I know, it's very Michael Scott of me, but it's easy to remember because a chrysalis is bright and shiny and hard on the outside, like a Skittle. And butterflies are also bright and shiny, like Skittles. And then cocoons are softer and duller in color, like fruit snacks. And moths. So I know it's a little ridiculous, but it makes it easier to remember, right? A chrysalis is a Skittle and a cocoon is a fruit snack. All organic, apparently. So that's their major differences. But let's talk about moths and butterflies by the numbers. Worldwide, there are 17,500 species of butterflies and a whopping 160,000 species of moth. Moths evolved before butterflies, so they've simply just had more time to diversify. The average lifespan of a butterfly is only 7 to 10 days, and that's if they're not eaten first. Speaking of eating, while I was on the field trip with my kids, one of the kids had a butterfly land on him and he just started screaming, "It's going to bite me!" I am here to let you know that it is physically impossible for a moth or a butterfly to bite or sting you. They don't have teeth or a stinger. They have a proboscis that can only suck or drink from flowers. There are even some moths whose life cycles are so short, they don't even have mouths. They literally have no way to bite you. So they're not going to eat you. They're not going to bite you. You are totally safe. There is no need to panic. And now to round out today's podcast, some butterfly and moth jokes to share with your friends. How do you get rid of butterflies in your stomach? Stop eating caterpillars. Why did the moth fail his driving test? He kept going towards the headlights. Don't go towards the light. I can't help it. It's so beautiful. Okay, last one, I promise. How can you tell when a moth passes gas? It flies straight for a second. Anyway, that's today's podcast. It's short, it's sweet, and it's moths and butterflies. I hope you had a good day and a very educational week. I'm Mimi Fotts, and this has been Hello from the Van. Springtime's got us buzzing. I'm Mimi Fotts, and this is Hello from the Van. A bee or a wasp? A hornet or a yellow jacket? Wait, is that a bumblebee or a honeybee? How do you know which is which? And which ones are most likely to bite or sting you? Those are the questions we are going to answer today on Hello from the Van. First things first, we need to talk about classifications. Bees are one classification and wasps are another. But did you know that they're all under a big, huge classification of wasps? Yes, bees, honeybees, bumblebees, carpenter bees are all technically under the wasp classification. They're in the same group as hornets, yellow jackets, paper wasps, and more. Basically, you have a very large umbrella of wasps. Bees and wasps are members of the order Hymenoptera, and as such share many characteristics and features. Basically, they are sister groups of the same family of wasp. Could you imagine if you and your sibling grew up in the same house, but everyone loved your sibling and hated you, even though you both grew up to do the exact same job? That's what happened to bees and wasps. Same household, very different outcomes. Visually, they even look similar and are easy to get confused. Wasps can look like bees and bees can look like wasps. It's all just a big insect family. And in that insect family, there's definitely some family politics. Let's talk about that. When we generally think of native pollinators or beneficial insects, most people's minds naturally go to the lovely honeybee. Would you be shocked to learn that honeybees are not native to the United States? They were brought over by pilgrims, the same folks that brought us dandelions. They were imported. Both bees and wasps are pollinators. But how many times have we heard, save the bees? It's never save the wasp or save the hornet. Why is that? I have some theories. Now, this is based on my own experience, so take from that what you will. I will back it up with some data, but you draw your own conclusion. In my research, I learned that there is an order to the aggression of bees and wasps. The most aggressive is the yellow jacket. The yellow jacket will defend their nests and their airspace. They get more plentiful as the summer goes on. So by the time you hit the end of the summer, yellow jackets are everywhere and they're very aggressive. These are the bright yellow insects that seek out your soda can in the summer. In addition to their aggression, yellow jackets can sting multiple times without any harm to themselves. It makes sense that pest control companies make millions of dollars every year keeping yellow jackets at bay from homeowners. There's a tragic misconception about wasps due to the yellow jacket. The yellow jackets are clumped in with paper wasps and docile hornets. Humans see a yellow striped bug and we panic. The general population despises all wasps due to the yellow jacket. If we think about it like flavors of ice cream, it would be like saying, listen, I tried a super spicy pepper flavored ice cream one time, so I don't like any ice cream at all. The tragic part, yellow jackets make up a tiny fraction of the wasps and native pollinators in this world. There are over 20,000 known species of bees. There are those cute little ones that you see running all around. You want to know what else is cute? The 100,000 different species of wasps. There are over 5 times more species of wasps than there are of bees. And that's just the ones that we know about. Wasps can also be adorable and beneficial. Did you know that if we took wasps out of our ecosystems, they would absolutely crumble? We cannot function and exist as a species, as humans, without the wasp. Here at Hello from the Van, we will not abide the wasp hate. We love our native pollinators. And with that, let's have a pollinator party. It is time for Hymenoptera social breakdowns. There are 2 types of Hymenoptera, social and solitary. You know how some animals travel in packs, like wolves, and others prefer the independent lifestyle? Insects are a lot the same. Some insects love being a part of a bigger group. In this case, it's called a hive or a colony. And some insects prefer a solitary life. It's kind of like the difference between living in a big house with lots of rooms and family members and aunts and uncles and cousins and you're all working and living together versus camping in the woods by yourself. Social, everyone all together, or solitary, you by yourself. Both bees and wasps can be social or solitary. The interesting part, all social colonies of bee and wasp last for only 1 year. Colonies and hives die off in the fall and winter. The remaining queens overwinter in the ground and start the process over again in the spring. This is, of course, all except for the honeybee. Of the hundreds of thousands of types of bees, wasps, and hornets, honeybees are the only type that we know of that keep their social structure through the winter and hibernate together. So not only are honeybees social, but they stay together in the winter. So now that we know about living conditions being social or being solitary, how else are bees and wasps the same? Both can be omnivores, meaning they eat both plants and meats. It's something they have in common with last week's chickens. Ironically, bees, yes, even the beloved honeybee, can be cannibalistic, meaning they eat their own kind to protect their hives. According to BBC Wildlife, cannibalism has been recorded in honeybees to protect the nest from threats, such as workers gone rogue and laying eggs, or during times of pollen shortage. Basically, if things get out of balance in the hive, they'll eat their own. Bumblebees have also been observed feeding on the carcasses of dead animals. In contrast, adult wasps, both social and solitary, only feed on sugars. These sugars can come from flower nectar, honeydew produced by aphids, or the wasp larvae themselves. They don't eat the larva. The larva actually produces a sugary liquid that the adult wasps consume. Adult wasps don't actually eat the prey that they capture and kill. They feed it to their young. I had no idea. Shocker of all shocker, adult wasps only eat nectar. There's been a couple times when I'm out having a picnic and I've had something like chicken, and I've noticed that wasps go to the chicken. I always thought they ate the chicken. Not true. They're taking off little bits to take back to their babies. Another incredible and awesome similarity between the bees and the wasps is that it is only the females of the species that do the work. And only the females of both species have stingers. If you've ever been stung by a bee or a wasp, it was a girl. Remember how we talked about yellow jackets and how they're the most aggressive branch of the wasp family? Well, it gets worse for them. According to the Utah State University Agriculture Science Department, 90%, yes, 90% of all stings from wasps come from yellow jackets. So that whole Hymenoptera umbrella that we talked about earlier, hundreds of thousands of species, 90% of all of their stings come from the yellow jackets. One insect is responsible for 90% of stings. That's huge. Yes, hornets and bees can sting you, but they don't want to. They simply want to be left alone. Yellow jackets, however, will seek out anything they even slightly perceive as a threat, and then they will sting away. The singular yellow jacket, they're giving everybody else a bad rap. Let's not blame an entire order of insect for the stings of one species. So we've covered a little bit of how they're the same. Similar in shape, in size, in body angles. They have lovely wings. They're all pollinators. They also can all be social and solitary. But how are they different? Well, when it comes to their bodies, wasps tend to have a longer, thinner body with a narrow section called a petiole that separates their head and their abdomen. Bees' bodies are stockier. They're a bit hardier, girthier, rounder than hornets or wasps. Basically, their bodies are different. One's rounder, one's thinner. Now let's talk about their legs. Because they're insects, all species of bees and wasps have 6 legs. Graham Hunt, a horticulturist at the National Aquarium, points out bees' legs are flat, while wasps' legs are round. Another difference, as bees evolved from hunters into pollen gatherers, some females developed pollen transport structures on their legs. Hornets don't have pollen baskets on their legs. It's strictly a bee characteristic. And now let's talk about stinger shape. As we talked about before, only the females have stingers. In wasps, the edges of these stingers are smooth. This is what allows them to sting over and over and over again. It's a clean cut in and out. Bees, however, have barbed stingers that remain embedded in the skin of the stingee. Basically, when they sting you, you will be able to see their stingers stuck in you. This is unique to the bee. Bees usually die after they lose their stinger because it takes a bit of them with it. They're less aggressive than wasps, and they only sting to protect themselves because of this. And to round out today's episode, we're going to talk about some safety tips for wasps and bees, things that will keep you safe, but also keep them safe. Remember, yellow jackets are the aggressors. They also grow more aggressive as their nests get larger. This is why you tend to have issues in late August as the summer days drag on. Their nests and territory is naturally expanding. So if you're going to spray for yellow jackets, do it early in the morning or late in the evening. Yellow jackets are most active and most aggressive during the day. The hotter the day, the more active they are. All yellow jackets, except the queens, die off in the fall and winter. This means in the springtime, this is critical queen capturing time. If you do not want yellow jacket nests in your yard at the end of summer, be proactive of the yellow jacket queens in the spring. Look for them and dispose of them properly. Where you see one, the rest will follow a few weeks later. So capture that one in early spring. When it comes to the rest of the hornet and wasp species, know that most of them are pretty docile. They want to be left alone. That's why we don't even notice the other 150,000 species. They're just doing their job pollinating and moving on with their short but incredible lives. How can you help the pollinators? According to the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service, there's a lot that you can do to be a good community member. Because like it or not, we're part of the pollinator community and they're part of ours. Plant a pollinator garden. It doesn't have to be big. It can be even as small as one plant in one flower pot. Nearly every patch of green space can help sustain pollinators with nectar. If you live in an apartment or somewhere that you don't have green space of your own, check with your local city government. There are a lot of programs available for kids and families to learn about and interact in pollinator-friendly environments. The next thing you can do, be on the lookout for pollinator nesting sites, not just the yellow jackets so you can avoid them, but everybody else. Also, know that many native bees are ground nesters. They need well-drained, bare soil to create their homes in holes called burrows. You can help by leaving a small patch of well-drained, bare ground at the edge of your lawn for ground nesting bees. Also, fun fact, bees love to face south so that they get the most sun possible during the day. So if you have the south side of your yard, make sure that there's a place for some bees to go. And finally, probably the most important step, avoid or limit your pesticide use. While pesticide is great for battling weeds and garden pests, try other actions first. A pesticide that is meant for one bug won't just stay with that bug. It has unintended consequences for the entire ecosystem. Do what you can before you reach for that pesticide. In short, let's do everything we can to be good neighbors. And with that, I'm Mimi Fox, and this has been another episode of Hello from the Van. I hope you're excited. It's the chicken episode of Hello from the Van. It's officially springtime, which means my chickens are back to producing eggs at full capacity, and I love my chickens. So today, we're answering chicken questions. We are going to start today with the life cycle of the chicken. It's the age-old question. Which came first, the chicken or the egg? I don't know, but I can tell you that the scientific name for the chicken is Gallus domesticus. It just means domesticated chicken. I can also tell you that according to the Smithsonian and lots of scientists, chickens are descended from dinosaurs. That's right, chickens are what's known as a theropod, and there were also dinosaurs that were theropods. So the belief is that chickens are descendants of meat-eating dinosaurs that were theropods. But enough about the Gallus ancestry. Let's get into some modern-day chickens. Here's the basics of chickens. Only the female chickens lay the eggs. Also, human farmers, we do not force hens to lay eggs. They do it on their own. Even wild chickens lay eggs. And why do chickens lay eggs? Well, it's part of their natural reproductive system. They do not give birth to baby chicks. They lay eggs. Laying eggs is a natural part of a hen's life. Do baby chicks lay eggs? No, they do not. Do teenager hens, sometimes called pullets, lay eggs? No, they do not. Hens must be mature enough to lay eggs. Their bodies have to reach a certain point. And this happens around their 6th month of life. If you went to Tractor Supply last week and got yourself some baby chicks and are expecting farm fresh eggs next month, I hate to tell you, but you're going to be sorely disappointed. It takes about 6 months for a hen chick to grow into a hen that can lay eggs. As I said before, laying eggs is naturally part of the chicken's reproductive system. It's how they bring life into this world. Now, the natural train of thought is, well, wait, if it's part of their reproductive system, every time I eat an egg, am I eating a baby chick? No, you're not. You're not at all. Let me explain why. Not all eggs can turn into chicks. Chickens, like humans, are what's called gonochoric, meaning you must have a male and a female to reproduce. In chickens, this means you have to have a rooster, and the eggs must be fertilized by that rooster for the eggs to be viable or to be able to turn into a baby chick. Unfertilized eggs, like the ones you buy at the grocery store, cannot, under any circumstances, turn into chicks. The eggs you generally buy at the grocery store are unfertilized. If you're concerned about this, if you look on your egg carton, it will generally say fertilized eggs if there is a rooster in the flock that egg came from. You can find fertilized eggs at very few places. There are places like Trader Joe's. They're seasonal, but it will say on the egg carton that they are fertilized eggs. So every time you crack open an egg, don't feel bad. That egg was going to exist if you eat it or not. And it was never going to turn into a chick because it was never fertilized. It's a use it or lose it type situation with eggs. And this leads me to another question. What if you have a flock, like I do, that you don't have a rooster, will the chickens still lay eggs? The answer is yes. A hen laying eggs is not determined by roosters. But what about the timing of the eggs? Does every chicken lay an egg every day? The short answer: no. Laying eggs is dependent on a lot of factors. For example, in winter, it tends to be darker and colder, and food is naturally more scarce. Remember, chickens lay eggs as part of their reproductive cycle. So of course, they're not going to want to bring a baby chick into a world with little food and lots of darkness that's cold. So they lay fewer eggs in the winter. Interestingly, a lot of chickens don't lay during this time without light supplementation. You might have noticed that even though it's cold in winter, there's still eggs at the grocery store. That's because farmers put lights and heaters in the coops to mimic the sun. This causes a natural cycle in the chicken's body to continue to produce eggs. I tend to think of my chickens more as pets, so I don't light supplement in the winter. I let my chickens take a much needed break in the winter. They are pampered. They are just at a chicken spa all winter long. And then when it starts to warm up like it has been the last few weeks, they ramp up production again, and I'm back to getting 5, 6, and 7 eggs a day. You want to know the interesting thing too? Wild chickens don't lay nearly as much as industrialized chickens. When I say industrialized chickens, I mean chickens that were made for laying eggs for humans. Laying an egg every day is very taxing on a chicken's body. They naturally don't lay eggs every day. Over time, humans have done what's called selective breeding to get chickens to lay nearly every day. Basically, you keep the highest producing chickens and get rid of the rest. Now let's talk about those eggs some more. Have you ever wondered about the color of eggs? My chickens actually give green and blue eggs. The first time I gave some to a neighbor, she said, "These are lovely, but I can't eat them." I was so confused. I said, "Of course you can." She said, "But they're green." She goes, "Aren't they just decorative?" I said, No, these are not decorative. These are eggs that you eat." I would then talk to her some more and come to realize that she genuinely believed that green eggs were white eggs that had spoiled. That is not how this works. That's not how any of this works. Chicken eggs come in a variety of colors and sizes. They can be deep dark brown, all the way to a pinky brown, to a white, to a blue, to a light green, to a beautiful dark olive green. The determining factor is genetics. It depends on the chicken that the egg comes from. Different breeds of chickens or types of chicken give different colors of eggs. All are edible, all are amazing. It just depends on the breed of chicken. If you see a differently colored egg, there's nothing wrong with it. It just means that it has different genetics than the eggs that you're used to. And once you've got those eggs in your hands, what do you do with them? Would you be surprised to know that Americans are one of the few countries that store their eggs in the fridge? If you are listening to today's podcast from outside the United States, you might be surprised to learn what our eggs have to go through before they get to the grocery store. In the United States, it is required by law for an egg to be washed, sanitized, and refrigerated before it can be sold at a grocery store. This extends the egg's freshness by over twice its natural life cycle. So basically, when eggs are sanitized, it removes a protective layer on the egg called a cuticle. A cuticle is a naturally protective layer on the egg that keeps bacteria out of the egg but lets oxygen circulate. It's part of the reason that unwashed eggs don't have to go in the refrigerator. They have a natural protective system all built in. But with that cuticle, it only lasts for about 21 days, or 3 weeks. But sometimes that's not enough time for industrialized eggs to get from one place to another. So in the United States, we wash and sanitize our eggs to give them more longevity for shipment. The crazy part is that this gives us a lot of longevity with our eggs. Would you be shocked to know that the egg you buy at the grocery store can be up to 2 months old? Yep, it sure can. By law, an egg can be sold up to 30 days after the date it is put into its carton, but it's not put in the carton right away. Farmers have an additional 30 days to get the egg from being laid into the carton. So the egg that you're getting at the grocery store can be up to 60 days old before it hits the shelf. The eggs are still considered good, but they're just older. Older sanitized eggs are just fine to eat, but if you were worried about them, just give it a quick smell test. If it starts to smell off, just toss it. One perk of older eggs is that they are easier to peel. They make great hard-boiled eggs. If you've ever tried to peel a farm fresh egg that's been hard-boiled, you know that it is a struggle. The fresher the egg, the harder to peel. The reason for this is that because they've been sanitized, oxygen can move freely between the outside and the inside of the egg. This adds more oxygen into the inside, into the yolk and the white of the egg, and makes it runnier. It also breaks down the membranes that keep it all together. The age of eggs is no yolking matter. And let's talk about those yolks. Have you ever noticed that some egg yolks are a darker, almost orange color than some others that are like a light yellow color? This is due to the chicken's diet. A darker yolk indicates that the chicken has had more variety in their diet. Darker yolks tend to have more vitamins as well as more omega-3 fatty acids. And speaking of the chicken's diet, chickens are omnivores. They are not vegetarians. If you ever see an egg carton that says, "Chickens fed a vegetarian diet," that is not natural. Chickens are omnivores. They eat bugs. They eat meat. They are predators to anything that is smaller than them. One time, a mouse got into my chicken's hutch. And you want to know what those chickens did? Yeah, it didn't end well for the mouse. They are tiny descendants of dinosaurs. They will eat just about anything. They are not vegetarians. We just got to be clear about that. Chickens are omnivores. They are not herbivores. They are not vegetarians. And they're definitely not vegan. And to end the podcast today, I'm going to tell you some chicken jokes. What do you call a chicken that likes to go on safari? An egg-splorer. How do chickens stay fit? They like to exercise. What's it called when a chicken falls off of a coop? An egg roll. Okay, last one. What's a chicken's favorite vegetable? An eggplant. All right. And with those ridiculous jokes, I'm Mimi Fox, and this has been an excellent episode of Hello from the Van. Why, hello, everyone. I'm Mimi Fox, and this is Hello from the Van. I was recently feeling rather poorly, and my doctor suggested a dandelion root tea to help with some of my symptoms. I ordered some online, and as I took my first delicious sip, it was then that I thought, wait a second, is this the same dandelion I've been ripping out of my yard for years? Or is this some other magical plant with the same name? Because this is delicious. It was, in fact, the same one I've been ripping out of my yard for decades. And that got me thinking, why have I heard my entire life that dandelions are a weed and undesirable, and now I am paying through the nose to give me what is naturally growing in my yard? And that brings us to today's topic. What makes a weed? Before we get too far into this topic, we need to lay down some terminology, some groundwork, if you will. We have 3 new words today. These words are noxious, invasive, and native, and they represent the 3 different type of plant categories used by scientists and governments all around the world. We're going to start with the word native. A native plant is a plant that comes from a specific area or region, and that's the area that it is critical to the ecosystem or biome. A great example of this is the saguaro cactus in Mexico and Southwest Arizona. It's native to that area, and it literally does not grow anywhere else on the planet. Its growth is critical to the area. It's so critical that there are government protections in place to keep the saguaro cactus thriving. You cannot cut down, move, damage, take a sample of, or use a saguaro cactus in any way without a permit from the Department of Agriculture. Doing so without a permit leads to hefty fines and is a felony. That's right. It is a class 4 felony to mess with the saguaro cactus without a permit. So that's one example of a native plant, one that is critical to the environment that it's from and native to a certain area. In short, native plants are the footholds of biomes and ecosystems. That brings us to our next word. The word is invasive. Invasive plants are non-native species that spread rapidly, causing ecological and economic harm by outcompeting native vegetation. Let's continue on with our saguaro cactus example. There's a threat to the saguaro cactus. Invasive, non-native, fire-adapted grasses create a dense fuel that fuels unnatural, intense wildfires in the Sonoran Desert. Basically, the biggest threat to the saguaro cactus is an invasive grass. There are other prolific invasive species that cause havoc anywhere they go around the world. If you're like me, you're probably wondering, but the only difference between a native plant and a non-native plant is time, right? Everything had to start somewhere, but it does matter because the native wildlife is sustained on native plants. It's like dominoes. If you disrupt one, you set off a chain reaction. A lot of invasive plants are really good at using water. They have ways to find water and hoard it for themselves, thus destroying ecosystems and choking out native plants. So, native means from the area, and invasive or non-native means it comes to the area and is harming the native ecosystem. And that brings us to our final word, noxious. Noxious plants are ones that threaten health and life of both humans and animals. They can be native or invasive. What makes something noxious is the harm that it does. These are plants that can injure or kill humans, wildlife, or agriculture herds. Noxious plants are so prolific at threatening life that the U.S. government has an entire classification system for them. Noxious plants are named and shamed here in the U.S., and billions, yes, with a B, billions of dollars are spent each year trying to eradicate and kill noxious plants. And now let's do some noxious weeds by the numbers. According to Congress.gov, the U.S. government spends $2.3 billion annually on a range of federal activities to prevent, control, and eradicate invasive and noxious weeds. It's a big problem. But why spend $2.3 billion a year on some weeds, on some noxious plants? Basically, if we didn't invest in noxious weed control, we would lose areas of our forest, agriculture systems, and our food development. With noxious weeds comes the destruction of ecosystems. So those are our three types of plants: native, invasive, also known as non-native, and noxious. And now that we know all about them, let's talk about weeds. After quite a bit of research, I kept getting the same standard answer for the question, what is a weed? And all of those answers were basically the same. A weed is a plant that you personally don't want in that location. Now, that didn't fit into any of these three categories that we've discussed. A plant that I don't want somewhere could be a plant that you want. It's a very loose definition, and under that definition, a rosebush or a strawberry plant could be considered a weed. The definition simply didn't sit right with me. It's just too broad. There has to be more to it than just, I said it's a weed, so it's a weed. That's not how science works. This led me to even more questions. What if a weed could be beneficial? What about that dandelion tea I've been drinking? Do some weeds secretly have superpowers the masses aren't aware of? If a weed isn't inherently invasive or a noxious plant, could it be helpful? And oh boy, did this lead me down a deep dive. Hooey! I spoke with an herbalist, I found an ecologist, and I even spoke with several different doctors about weeds, herbs, and medicine. Here's what the ecologist said. I'll sum it up for you. She basically said that while many people think of weeds as invasive species, most weeds are not. Weeds in a lot of areas are actually crucial to ecosystems. They have great ecological value. They grow fast. They're adaptable. They prevent erosion. They bring nutrients from deep into the soil to the top of the soil for other plants. They support native pollinators, native wildlife, and more. This was mind-blowing to me. I don't know why I didn't think about weeds in this way. She basically said, a weed is in the eye of the beholder. Let's go back to our dandelion tea example from the beginning of the episode. Why do we consider dandelions a weed? Especially if it's something that I am paying so much money for to order online. Well, the answer's kind of disappointing. It's capitalism, baby. Dandelions were introduced as a hardy food source in the Americas by the Pilgrims. Dandelions quickly became an invasive species in some areas due to their quick growth, but they were still food. It would be like corn stalks randomly growing in your yard. Annoying a little, but still delicious food. For thousands of years, dandelions were a hearty food source. They have more vitamin C than a lemon. Their leaves are great in a salad. Their roots are great for the digestive system and more. But we simply stopped eating them. So now, rather than being food in your yard, they're considered weeds. Corn would be a weed too if we weren't eating it. Lawn and fertilizer companies have actually used the dandelion as a sign of lawn neglect since World War II. For thousands of years, dandelion, food. For 85 years, we've been told that dandelions aren't food, but instead are a blight. They're a weed, and it makes sense. If you're not eating the food, the plant is a waste of space. So that's one type of weed, but what about the others? Well, I talked to an herbalist and a pediatrician. Here's what they said. Lots of plants have medicinal value, but the knowledge of the plant has been lost. So now the plant is just seen as a weed. One specific example of a plant that was discussed with both the herbalist and the pediatrician was elderberries. Elderberries are one of the most studied medicinal plants in the entire world. There are many double-blind studies about their use in medicine, specifically to fight cold and flu symptoms. You might have even seen elderberry medicine next to your traditional cold medicines at places like Walmart, Target, CVS. The interesting thing about elderberries is you're not supposed to eat them straight off of the branch. They don't taste good and they can give you a stomach ache. But processed, they make a delightful syrup and are highly valued. In fact, organic dried elderberries sell for over $34 a pound. It's one of the most expensive harvests in the United States. Even the herbalist and the pediatrician agreed that as a plant, it's incredibly useful, and yet most people wouldn't even recognize it. A few summers back, I was walking through my neighborhood at the end of a long day and recognized an elderberry bush in my neighbor's yard. Branches so heavy with fruit that they bent over the sidewalk. I asked the neighbors about it, and they said that tree was here when we moved in 20 years ago. The berries taste awful. They stain everything. We just haven't had time to cut it out. I was flabbergasted. I said, I will take everything. Can I harvest it? And I will pay you for what I collect. They said, oh no, as long as it's not getting tracked in the house, we would love for you to take it. My kids and I were able to harvest over 20 pounds of elderberries from their bush. What I'm trying to say here is that my neighbors hated those elderberry bushes. For them, they were an absolutely overgrown weed that stained the sidewalk, got tracked into the house on their shoes, and ruined their carpet. But for me, it was a gold mine. And this brings me to my own personal conclusion. That weeds aren't just plants that are growing somewhere you don't want them to be. They're not necessarily native or non-native or noxious. It would seem that there's a fourth category, something I'd like to call naive plants. These are plants we've lost our common knowledge about. Things like dandelions and purslane and elderberries. Basically, one man's weed is another man's naive treasure. We're all about critical thinking here at Hello from the Van. So today's episode comes with a challenge. This spring, before you pull out that weed in your yard, I'd like you to look it up. Learn its name. If it's a native, invasive, or noxious plant, take it from a naive weed to a categorized one, and then proceed accordingly. You might be surprised by what you find. And with that, I'm Mimi Fotz, and this has been another episode of Hello from the Van. Looking for sources? They're all cited right there in the show notes. We'll see you next week.